Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, a compensatory counter-racist code by Neely Fuller Jr. We are covering pages 359 to 369, going over area 9, war slash counter war. And getting started, I have to read the beginning because it's so similar to just my experience. I grew up in so-called South Central where I had to literally run from shootouts, people shooting at each other, experienced many of drive-bys, experienced many of police kicking down my door in the middle of the night. So I've experienced many war zone type scenarios, but I never knew it to be connected to racism and white supremacy, nor I knew that I should be expecting these things and I should be prepared for them. So 359, the code says, war. As long as white supremacy racism exists, always think, speak, and act as if you are in a battle zone and that the people, white or non-white, may do you bodily harm at any time, at any place. Do not think that any place in the known universe is safe. At all times, do your best to be prepared to fight or to flee unjust attack. Danger in the form of injustice and or incorrectness exists every place in the known universe. The white supremacist racists collectively intend to practice white supremacy racism forever. Therefore, they will kill or help to kill enough non-white people to satisfy their need to have fun, but they do not intend to kill so many that no non-white people remain. They kill or help to kill enough non-white people so as to frighten those who remain. This is the only way that they can continue to enjoy practicing white supremacy. White supremacist racists do not only enjoy killing non-white people, but they also enjoy terrorizing, confusing, intimidating, brutalizing, depriving, and making fun of the weakness, stupidity, and ignorance of non-white people. White supremacists intend to do this forever. Yeah, so this just again reminds me of just my life as a confused victim of racism and white supremacy. Growing up, thinking that these white killers and the movies are people to look up to, thinking that they're people that I want to be like, and I suspect that severely retarded my thinking and my ability to become a correct thinking person because I was thinking that killing is fun, playing video games, kill people for fun, watching movies, watching all that banned from TV stuff, rotten.com, all those sites I frequented in my youth, and all those definitely retarded my ability to be constructive. And that is definitely the plan of the white supremacists to expose victims of racism to acts of killing so that we are more susceptible to participate in killing, or also we don't think it's a bad thing because I literally grew up surrounded by death, chaos, and destruction. But I never batted an eye. I never thought anything was odd about people dying around me constantly or hearing about people die. I just thought it was normal. But there's nothing normal about death, either whether it's a life of a person or an animal or creature. Nothing should be killed. It's up to the creator to decide what should be on this planet and what should not be on this planet, not white people or victims of racism. It's really important to understand that killing has been made entertaining, and it shouldn't be. It should be a very serious business, a very serious act, only done in necessary times. But in the system of white supremacy, a white person could be mad at their coffee and go in and shoot up a salon or whatever else they decide to target. So really, really dangerous times, and I really appreciate that the code says that there's no place in this known universe where it is safe. If there are white supremacists around on the planet anywhere, that means everyone is in danger, especially everyone not white. I'll close there to see if others have things to comment, share.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. The comments that I had on killing on that portion of the code. It also, the one thing that brought to mind is, I believe it said how it's glorified, especially as you mentioned, 0526. It's glorified, and especially in media, television, like TV shows, like anywhere, you just see it being glorified. And also, like, not to just say white supremacy, but also just how people have become manipulated to think that killing is like cool, like part of the cool kids. And you kind of think of like, I think of like games or video games. That's like a little lower because it's a video game, but also just thinking about how our psyche has to like be programmed in order to be like, oh, this is so fun, this is so cool. Not everyone will have, I don't want to say the guts, but not everyone will have like that thing in them where they can go out and actually kill someone, unless obviously for like protection. But just thinking is how our psyche has like been reprogrammed to think this way, to think that killing is okay, and think that is something that's cool, even entertaining, something to be watched on TV. I used to watch what was it, Criminal Minds, all the time. Like, although that show is like, you might learn a little or two, but I think it's mainly of just glorifying like killing each scene, like each episode. That's all it talks about, obviously, because that's the show. But also, like, there's countless other shows that does the same exact thing, and it's just like, if there's no violence somewhere or any killing, it's like this movie wasn't cool. And even thinking about like the fighting movies, or like what we see is like, oh, this is all just make believe, but someone has gotten these ideas from somewhere. It doesn't. It's not just happens to be out of nowhere that all the villains are like dark complexion or dark lighting, and just everything. Just everything about it is just like, it still perpetuates the idea like, hey, dark is bad, or being the cultural other, like, let's kill. But that's just my initial thoughts on that.
Thank you, Benaya. Really well said. And yeah, that, like, those types of shows are definitely mentioned in the code. Making like a mystery of who killed who, how they did it, making that a mystery, making that like something that people, watch and be like, oh, like, whoa, can you believe he did that? Oh, that's so interesting that this person slaved this person that way, or destroyed that person that way, and hid the body this way and put the body there. So all this incorrect situations being placed on television for our enjoyment, which should be an indication to a correct thinking person to how depraved we are as a collective people, white and non-white people. We've been made really, really beastly to watch people suffer and die, and to call that entertainment. Really, really sick. I really also appreciate this being in the code. This is the race war, the only war. Because I remember very, very, very rarely I would hear that term, race war. And I always thought it was just like, the whites, going against the blacks. But I never thought it was serious. I just thought it was like, some super, super neo-Nazi stuff. I didn't know that it was connected to a system with a seemingly infinite amount of power. So us being told that we are in a race war. Like this is not some sort of exaggeration or a metaphor or saying we are actually in a race war where the people who classify themselves as white are at war with people who they classify as not white, and they maintain this war through what was mentioned before: terrorizing, confusing, intimidating, and brutalizing non-white people. So if one ever hears a term of like the war or like the conflicts going on in the area of the world known as Middle East, that's a good opportunity to correct whoever is saying, calling those things incorrect terms. Those are just small battles and this race war that white people have going on in various places of the planet. And what it looks like is so-called military in those areas destroying non-white people and calling it looking for terrorists, looking for insurgents, or looking for whomever. You know, it's all incorrect. It's all a symptom of us being in a grand scale race war. And I'm gonna read this from 360, which is very important, and I think it checks out 100%. Question: what can be done to stop white people from unjustly killing non-white people and stop non-white people from unjustly killing each other? Answer: according to compensatory counter-racist logic, as long as white supremacy exists, nothing can be done to stop white people from unjustly killing non-white people or stop non-white people from unjustly killing each other until the occurrence of one or more of the following. One, non-white people consistently kill white people in numbers equal to or greater than the number of non-white people killed. Two, white people decide to end white supremacy racism forever and replace it with justice, balance between people. Three, the force that created the people of the known universe decides to put an end to white supremacy and decides to put an end to the killing of people by people. I would like for number two to take place. White people decide to end white supremacy racism forever and replace it with justice, balance between people. That would be the best course of action that would equal possibly minimum bloodshed, minimum loss of life. I think number three, because of how time fluctuates in the universe, 1 year for us may be like a nanosecond for the creator. So if the creator will intervene, it won't be for a very long time. So I don't think we should wait on that intervention. And number one, I think that is also, it makes a lot of sense because white people are worried about their number. All it would take is a correct thinking non-white person to go into the hood and convince the non-white people who spend all day shooting each other and killing each other to target the actual enemies and not each other. And then if you have a bunch of, non-white people called gangbangers or hoodlums who begin to kill the enemy and not each other, that may do something. Having these gangs become participants in counter war, that is also something that could happen. But again, that will cause so much bloodshed and chaos and destruction that number two is the best course of action. White people deciding to put an end to white supremacy racism forever and replace it with justice, balance between people. But 2021, it seems that they have no interest yet in producing justice. So these are really interesting points to think about as we attempt to solve this problem. We can have Ms. Williams and then Ms. B.
I'm finding, and it could be just me as being a female and the emotions that come with females when it comes to war and killing. But I'm finding this chapter very difficult to read. Even the few pages that we had to read, I'm still finding it difficult because me being a non-white female, to me, that's the last thing I want to see is someone's life being taken, especially if it's not in a form of protecting yourself, right? But I realize the fact that war has been on the planet a long time, a long time. And for it to continue, it just makes me wonder what kind of mindset do people have that enjoy killing? I mean, I don't even want to fathom the kind of mind that could be, because it would seem like to me that if a person really enjoyed killing, that they just may not ever get tired of killing, right? Because they enjoy it so much. And it seems like that's where the people who classify themselves as white are. They enjoy killing. So when I look at the 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 choices, and then number 3 says about the force that created the people of the known universe decides to put an end to white supremacy and decides to put an end to the killing by people. Now, I don't know what this force is. I really don't. But it makes me wonder if this force exists. Now, I may be going off in the deep end, y'all, because I can tell you this chapter, it really got me thinking, but it's a different type of thinking. Is that if the people who created them, right, if they're the ones who have to stop them, it seems like to me they already knew what they were capable of when they made them. So why would you make people that enjoy killing? So I'm under the impression that the force that made them might have been us. I'm going with Dr. Wilson's theory, is that non-white people made these white people, right? And if that's so, we're the only ones that can stop them because we made them being the force. I'm just thinking off the top, right? Now, I would hope that number 2 could take place, that they would decide to do it on their own. But at the rate we're going, I don't think they're going to decide that. I don't think they're capable of deciding that. I mean, I just don't. I don't think they're capable. And I'm not talking about all white people. I'm talking about the one who enjoy killing and mistreating people all over the whole planet. I think that's a serious matter, to the point that there's something really deceptive in your brain cells that would cause you to enjoy that. So if we are the people who made them, right, and they come from us, then we're the only force that's able to stop them. And it would be to the point that we would have no other choice but to do what's necessary to keep the evil from continuing on the planet. But I really hope that they'll do it themselves. But I really don't think they're gonna do it. But it just makes me think war should not be a solution. It just should not be. You know, like when you were talking before about the soldiers, the military in different countries, and they go in and they say they go in as a peacekeeping force. What's peaceful about killing people? If you're going in as a peacekeeping, you should be trying to stop the people who are killing and not have to kill anybody, except you have no other choice but to do that because they refuse to stop. But I don't see military really being a peacekeeping force as though they say they are. I think militaries are really designed to be at war with anybody who does not agree with what they want to do. So the thing to do is, we don't agree, let me kill you. Instead of thinking about, if we don't agree, then where can we find compromise that we can agree without killing each other? I think that's the most inhumane thing for any person to do, is want to take the life of another being that they did not have a right to take. It was not in a form of protection, but just in a form of, because I can, I will. I just hate the idea of war. I know it may be a necessary evil that may have to take place, but I really hope that's not necessary. I'm mute.
Hello, I want to take it back to 359 really quick. Right up under war, it says, as long as white supremacy, racism exists, always think, speak, and act as if you are in a battle zone, and that people, white or non white, may do you bodily harm at any time in any place. And that's something that I've always felt like that, dealing with trauma and mistreatment and not knowing where it was coming from. And so what I would like to do is suggest, something that I've been doing is, you know, having a emergency bag with a first aid kit, candles, um, canned food, stuff like that. And because you never know, I mean, if we're in the middle of a war, then you never know when you have to get up and leave. You know, you never know what's going to happen around you. And having to deal with blackouts, so-called blackouts, brownouts, where, whether it was from the city just had to cut the Con Edison off, the lights off, because a power grid or whatever went out. Having to live through that, I've I've now prepared myself. Okay, if that would happen again, um, these are the things that I need to have. I don't have to wait until something happens and then try to run out and go to the store and buy these items. So I just want to suggest that to everybody.
Very constructive suggestion always. Yeah, very on code as well, to be prepared. Exactly what the code says, to have supplies ready in case one needs to move abruptly, relocate, and especially if white people put what they're planning in their TV and stuff. There's a lot of post-apocalyptic end of days content that is always being created. So it's only possibly a matter of time before the 21st century massacre takes place, where white people decide it's time for us to go out and kill Black people, non-white people. So something I think about quite often is when is the next Black massacre, besides the ones that are taking place every single day in the area of the world known as Africa. And back to what you said, Ms. Williams. Yeah, I agree. Life, so-called life, a person's life, I believe once upon a time was once a precious thing, cherished by correct thinking people. But once this system of white supremacy got going, that totally changed. In life of the life of a non-white person has become has no value, has absolutely no value unless it's serving the system, white supremacy. And said some really interesting things about how we are the perhaps it's our responsibility to stop white people because we possibly created them. Reminding me of the Yaqub story that I heard Malcolm X talk about, how Yaqub was a ancient Black who taught white people how to use trickery and deceit, and taught them how to go about conquering the whole planet. So even in myth, we are responsible for creating these people who now classify themselves as white. And it's definitely our responsibility to retard the system, bare minimum, by getting on code and no longer participating in their nonsense, being serious about solving the problem. If white people can't go outside and see Black people dancing, being silly, and being their clowns, then I don't think they will like that very much. I think they will either have to produce justice or kill all of us, and that's something that I have no problem with. And people in this business shouldn't, because this slow torture to death, this slow torture have us all imprisoned in this nightmare called white supremacy. It's not for me. I decided to come to this planet to help solve the problem. Did not think it would be such a task, to say the least. And this also gives some insight to what Helen B just mentioned, that I'm going to go ahead and read from 361. It says, violence, question. If anyone in the known universe should be harmed, who should be harmed the most? Answer, according to compensatory counter-racist logic, if harm must be done to a person, it is correct to do the most harm to those racist white supremacists who have been harmed the least after having done the most harm. This is the law of compensation. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's very correct, because by the boatloads, millions and millions of non-white people, especially Black people, are just thrown away, just die of starvation, die of mass killings, disappear all over the area of the world known as Africa, and all over the area of the world known as the United States. I'm always seeing missing. And I'm like, in a system of justice, this would not happen. And I suspect many of those missing folk are being housed somewhere, are being captured by white supremacists directly or indirectly for very nefarious reasons involving Area 8. So it's really, if anyone needs to die and needs to be taken off the planet permanently, it is most certainly racist white supremacists who have created this mess that we were born into. And the code also states, same page 361, during conditions in which direct, non-just violence is being enacted against you or others near you, try to support and defend yourself and others who are in need by correctly doing the following. 1, acquire and learn how to effectively use those tools and or weapons that are necessary to support and defend yourself and or others against great and non-just attack. 2, acquire and or maintain at your place of residence a minimum amount of those material things that are not essential and or not worthy of serious protection from theft, damage, or destruction. 3, be ready for sudden danger. Be ready to suddenly relocate or be forced to dislocate, and do so with minimum amount of loss, confusion, inconvenience, or discomfort. Very important, very remnant of what Helen B mentioned, having a little survival aid kit nearby, and maybe even take it on and go if you have to leave your dwelling, because the longer the system of white supremacy is on a planet, as long as the system of white supremacy is on a planet, leaving one's dwelling is a very, very dangerous decision. And yeah, even in your dwelling, there's very, very little preventing white supremacists from kicking down your door and harming you or whoever looks like you. Do others have any notes they wanted to share? Comments?
I would add, in regards to being prepared to fight at any time. Fights can accidentally take place. Some victims like to wear these things known as J's, and if you accidentally step on them, that could end badly for you. So yeah, definitely being prepared to fight could just be caused by an accident.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of people die behind things that they own. So a lot of people get their self. It's kind of like don't become the target. Kind of gotta dress yourself down, basically, because then you're not targeting just people that like what you wear, but you're targeting people that want what you wear too.
And then one thing I would add, I do apologize, I'm outside, but one of the things I would add too is the importance of learning how to use a weapon. It doesn't have to necessarily be a gun, but it can be just like a knife, or even just learning how to do some fighting. When I was young, play fighting to be any type of like training, but actually train myself is to really understand like how to use a weapon and learn how to use it. Thank you.
Yeah, I just have when I go out, when I have to go out, I just have a script prepared just in case I get into conflict with non-white Black people. I will simply say I don't harm or fight other Black people. If you go find me a white supremacist, I can fight that person, but I do not fight Black people, and I would just walk away. And of course, when I'm walking about, I attempt to be courteous to other Black people, and yeah, I definitely don't attempt to draw any attention to myself. I dress very minimalistically. It's a great way to avoid eyes on you and attention. And definitely remember many fights occurring over shoes. And I remember being in my an area of the world in the South Central. I was wearing a certain color shoestrings, and I was told to take the shoestrings off, or else I was going to be harmed by so-called gangbangers. But that particular day, I was given a pass by the gang to go through their territory without having to take my shoestrings off. But I was threatened that if I come here again with the shoestrings, it's going to be a problem. So very danger is ever present from white people and non-white people, because that is the system we were born into. Go ahead, Mr. Kwaku.
Peaceful greetings. I just wanted to kind of comment on what some of the things that have been said earlier. Earlier when we were talking about kind of killing and the role it's played in the white supremacist, I guess, system we live in. I wanted to add to that as well that oftentimes killing is kind of taken a place where it seems like it's sometimes the only answer to solving some of the greater issues that we have. Killing seems to be the end all be all for most people, or a necessary, like he says in the book, a necessary loss, something like that. But I've noticed that the white supremacists have done an awesome job of making it seem this way, that killing is necessary and it will always be necessary. In order for things to happen, or for lack of a better word, progress, people must die in some instances. Like, for instance, coming up with a vaccine or something, people are going to have to die in order for this vaccine to be produced. In order for there to be peace, people are going to have to die. And it's things that, those kind of things are, you see that in all their books, all the media, all of their mannerisms, whatever you want to call it. So I just wanted to add that to that. And then on page 360, where I wanted to talk about where at the top of 360, where he has in bold, he says, "This is the race war, the only war." Now, when I read that, it just got me thinking, because a lot of times people are always talking about their, this was when I was a little bit more confused about racism, but excuse me, they're trying to start a race war, or they're doing this to start a race war. So I'm under the impression that many people, especially non-white people, are unaware that the race war is here, it's now, and it's actively going on. That there is no other war, at least no other war greater than the race war. I just so it got me thinking, like, how can we get that point across to people that the race war is here, and now we're living in the race war. So right now we need to be doing all we can. We need to be thinking, speaking, and acting in a manner to produce a system of justice to end this race war, which is the system of racism, white supremacy. So kind of like thinking of what can we say to people? How can we get people to act, or even to realize, especially the non-white people, to realize that we're living in the race war. The race war is now, That was kind of a question I posed. If anybody would like to answer that. But before that, I also wanted to add, it also gets me thinking about something that Mr. Neely Fuller said on his recent broadcast about the future generation. And I hope all you guys heard that too. If not, I think it was like the first 10 minutes of the broadcast that just passed on Tuesday. But he was talking about the future generation. This is something that my parents have constantly said to me. They repeat it all the time, saying the next generation is going to come around and fix things. The next generation's are going to be the ones to do this. The next generation. And the way that Neely Fuller kind of just put it, it's just like a recipe for laziness. I don't know if those were his exact words, but he did use the word lazy. And it just got me thinking, like, is the reason why people don't want to realize we're in a race war, could it be because of how lazy they are, or the lack of will they have to end racism? Just a thought. I do have that question if anybody would like to answer. Take a stab at it.
I appreciate you saying that they're trying to start a race war. I also remember hearing that a lot whenever something would happen, like a race soldier would kill a victim of racism, whenever that happened, and non-white people would get mad. I would see people saying, "Oh, they're trying to start a race war," and that is such a deceitful tactic for white people to use, saying that we're trying to start a race war when they have been waging a race war against us for centuries. So I definitely remember that. And quickly, can you re-ask your question? I didn't catch it.
Thank you for that, 05. My question was regarding the race war. How do we get other victims of racism to understand and or realize that the race war is here now, and that is the only war that is going on, the most major war going on currently?
My answer for that one is echoing what Helen B said: to lead by example. but to also show them, like, it may be hard for a victim to um to listen to hour-long lectures by counter racist scientists. It may be difficult for them to read a book in a group or by themselves. So I think a great resource is just to show them websites that is discussing the behaviors of white people, which is a great example of a website to share with victims of racism is theFairDevil.com, because that site is just a huge catalog of racist men and racist women practicing racism in the form of direct violence, which is how they maintain and refine this war. So we must show them better than we could tell them, unfortunately, because that is how we have been trained. We have been trained to be for lack of a word, we have trained to be a people who just do not want to face reality, do not want to face, do not want to change. We don't want to change to become serious. So perhaps if a victim sees that on a large scale, suspected racist white people are just doing diabolical things 24/7 in all areas of the globe. So perhaps that may encourage them, um, but I may be incorrect. You go ahead, Ms. B.
Hi, I want to Nana Ya, I hope I have that correct. She mentioned something about defense, about yeah, about self-defense. She didn't use that term, but that's along the lines of what she was talking about. And I was also thinking about that myself. Um, in the area of the planet where I'm residing at the moment, there are so-called Asians being attacked, and so the NYPD, they're giving free self-defense classes to these people, and I'm going to go, and I'm going to go in a few weeks. And when I go, I'm going to report to y'all everything that happens, and I want to watch. I want to see how are they going to tell me no, a non-white Black person no, that I can't take self-defense classes when I am also being mistreated and harmed. So yeah, so that's one thing that I suggest for the males and the females to take self-defense classes. Why not?
Always important. Improving an attitude, one skill set slash tool set, and being able to defend yourself, being able to understand firearms, knives, combat knives, where to harm a target to get out of immediate danger, how to flee from immediate danger. All these things are very necessary, and yeah, definitely. Well said, Miss B. Any other
And
folks?
bow and arrows. In some parks, they have targeting practice of bow and arrows. So go, those are like a little amount of money to spend to try to learn how to do a bow and arrow.
Yeah, and being in the so-called United States, um, especially now that they're ending the assault rifle ban in California, at least they're attempting to. It may be a good time for folks to get arms if they have the means to do so. Um, never a bad thing being protected if you know how to use those arms to protect yourself and produce constructive results. Not like the white supremacists use them to spread mass suffering and death around the planet. Any other folks like to answer the question before we move on?
My experience has been that so the non-white person is going to have to be receptive. The non-white person that you're talking to about war and counter war, in order to get them to understand the broad scope of how racism, white supremacy is practiced. And you really have to be careful in that conversation because, as Joe Strong used to say, Josh Wickett, sorry, didn't want to use his government name. Josh Wickett used to say, they will, a non-white person you're talking to about that will attack you. So it's a very delicate exchange of ideas, so to speak. But when you begin to reveal to other non-white people who are saying, they trying to start a race war, and you begin to reveal the fact that they are already in a race war, to some non-white people, they can become very irritated, very agitated, because most of us are already on edge, whether we realize it or not. So in those discussions, just be prepared that that is a high possibility, a very likely possibility, if you're going to have those discussions with non-white people. The same people who are warring against you have defined for you what a war is. When you think about that, when somebody has the power to tell you what a war is, even though they're mistreating you on a daily basis, if they have the power to tell you what a war is, they have the power to tell you what a war is not. And just as soon as you respond with, "Hey, you warring against me right now," they'll say, "No, that's not a war at all." And it can get other non-white people to think that it's not a war at all because they're in the powerful position. And so, as Dr. Wilson used to say, all of their arrows are pointing at you, and they can get all of your arrows to point at each other, in that, kind of situation. So my only suggestion is just to be careful in those conversations with other non-white people, because if, a lot of times we'll say something because we know it, whether it's true or false, we know it, and we want other people to know that we know it, and we'll get into arguments with other non-white people just based on that. Them saying something that we think is not true. So we'll argue with them about whether or not it's true. We'll express our idea of what the truth is, and it just becomes a back and forth. So avoid that kind of, for the lack of a better word, communication, because it only leads to conflict. So you have to really assess where the conversation is going to go even before it gets there. Is my suggestion. Now, if the person is, if they have what people refer to as creative thinking, you can talk about the logic of somebody being born in prison and don't know what a prison is. And the warden is telling everybody that solitary confinement is prison. Nobody else is in prison except the people in solitary confinement. And walking through a conversation of different scenarios and have them think about that and talk to them about that. It wouldn't take very long for if the person, is able to think creatively. Boy, I really hate using that word creatively, for the lack of a better word. Then it won't take very much conversation. Excuse me. It won't take very much conversation for them to come to the realization that they are in a prison right now. Is that those kind of logical conversations that get people's here it is, I'm getting ready to use the word again, creative juices flowing, so to speak, in terms of how they think. I don't remember what the second part of, or what the second question was, but I hope I've helped to provide you some ideas about how to conduct that conversation, the logic associated with it, and some suggestions. Proceed with caution.
Yeah, I would strongly second that part of proceeding with caution, because I've lost every single so-called friend I've had deciding to attempt to produce justice. Necessary losses, I'd say. And yeah, perhaps a better terms to use could be just getting that person to think logically or correctly when you are able to present to them scenarios depicting the race war and the race problem. I'm gonna read from
that might be a better term, but I don't disagree with you on that. But those are almost dismissive. And I'm talking. I'm criticizing myself, not you, when I say that, because I've used those before, and it's almost like telling a person that they're not thinking in the best way. By saying, you're not thinking correctly. I cringe if I have to do that, because that's not, from my perspective, that's not what a conversation is supposed to be about. That's not what communication is supposed to be about. Anytime I put somebody on the defense, I've already lost in terms of communication. So I don't want to be dismissive while I'm talking to them. And I've done that before and, learned, process of learning, that may not be the best way to go about doing it.
Agreed. Perhaps not telling them, not using the terms logically thinking and correct thinking, but indicating to them that their thinking is not logical and not correctly as pleasant as one can be when trying to communicate that to a victim. Nana, would you like to share?
Yes. Can I be heard okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. One of the things I thought about during this conversation is just going back to square one. Like when having a conversation with someone, in the beginning, it just says just to ask questions, one of the ways I don't want to say like caught someone up, or not even, they caught themselves, because if you ask questions, it's almost like they go in circles and then they can catch like, oh, what I just said doesn't make sense, because the next question will reveal that. But that was one of my questions too, as I read this section, is like how to communicate the race war, but also like anytime I can even just communicate that we're victims, that doesn't even go past like anything. It doesn't go anywhere. It's kind of just like, I'm not a victim, you know? Or if they have like now, like if you go through a certain instinct or situation or experience, you get this labeled called you are a survivor. Like whether it's any type of thing, like you survived, you're a survivor. So now anytime you hear the word victim, they almost like, well, no, I overcame this, I survived this, I done this, I got past this, I'm this high in my degree. So it's like they almost like use like, I don't want to say materials or like things right in front of them to justify how they're not a victim. So going and saying like we're in a race war and like explaining that, it's like, I don't know if it'll logically make sense in their head. Does that make sense? Anyone has thoughts on that? Like how to communicate like
think
the race war without saying they're a victim? Because I don't know why that word just throws people off.
I guess because in the world they always say, "Don't pay me as a victim, pay me as like a survivor. I don't want to be pitied on," kind of thing. When in reality, we are pity because we are victims. But I think first they have to know they're in a war. And I think that's the hard thing to get past people, is that they don't know they're in a war. They think all the functions we have is normal. Everything that's going on is supposed to be, it's normal.
Yeah, and the question I've asked to get people's brain computer thinking about what's happening on planet Earth is that, and you could either include the system of white supremacy or not. You can say, okay, if we're not in a system of white supremacy, then why are Black people and non-white people throughout the planet suffering and being killed at extremely large rates, and it doesn't seem to be happening to white people at anywhere close to our level? Is it because non-white people are just inferior? Are we deserving of this death and suffering that is taking place amongst us 24/7? And or the question could be, why is there so much death and suffering amongst non-white and Black people? Why is it happening? Just trying to get them to give you an answer to their why. Why do you think all this death and suffering is taking place? And then maybe you can kind of guide them or help them to come to the realization that it's a sophisticated plan orchestrated by racist man and racist woman to create this death and suffering throughout planet Earth. And
I'm just, yeah, can I add to
One
that?
thing,
Uh,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh yeah, just really quick. One of the things too, when you have that conversation of, when you ask that question of like just saying like why white people or why white supremacy is killing non-white people, almost just like opens the door to the conversation of, well, are they criminals? You know, because in this like society that we live in, they already have painted a narrative of Black people particularly a certain way, to like any person registering their brain is like, if you see a Black person a certain way, like looking a certain way, they automatically get like nervous, or they're a gangbanger, or they're this, or they're all of these dangerous and all of these things. So if you see someone like being mistreated, they almost always go to, oh well, it's the law, you know. But instead of like questioning the law, they just automatically just like live by it. So it's very interesting. It's a very interesting conversation when you ask them, um, like, why do you think like white supremacy are killing non-white people?
Mr. Williams, would you like to chime in?
Oh, yes, sir. Just wanted to make a suggestion about the victim. It may help to talk about it in such a way that that you're explaining what that person is a victim of. White people have spent huge amounts of time and effort to get non-white people not to think that we are victims of anything. You know, so that is the weight of the system itself in their favor for us not to think that we are victims of anything. And I found that I've had to say victims of racism or victims of, we even had an acronym for that back in the day, VOR, and everybody knew that it was victim of racism or victims of white supremacy. If it's already been established in the conversation that racism is white supremacy and white supremacy is racism, if that has not already been established in the conversation, then I would always say victims of racism, white supremacy, to make sure that I connected those two, so that the person would think about that, you know, those two things being connected together, racism and white supremacy. Even if they don't know that they're thinking about it, they're hearing it and it's registering in their brain, you know. But just to, you know, tell a non-white person that, you know, we're victims, or, you know, you're a victim, I'm a victim, that may fall on deaf ears if, you know, it hasn't already been established what it is that these people are victims of. I think I said it before. Okay, that's enough for now. Thanks. I'm off the mic.
Miss Williams.
I too think in the lines of Mr. Williams on that, because I was thinking about, for me, as I began to, I think I was thinking about the first time I remember hearing the word victim of racism, white supremacy. And then it dawned on me when I remember hearing it, I'm trying to figure out, what are they talking, victim? What is that? I mean, how did I become a victim, right? So as y'all was speaking, I looked in the word guide, and the word guide has the definition of victim on page 406, and then it goes to page 408, victim of racism. And I think that if you're gonna be talking to people, you have to make sure they understand what that definition means, because if they don't understand that, just the word victim itself, most people would have a problem with it because it makes you appear to be weak or not have the power to protect yourself, right? Which you really don't, but they don't know that they don't. They assume that I can protect myself no matter what, but they don't realize if you're a victim of racism, white supremacy, that's a different form of protection you have to try to look at, because you're so dominated without you even understanding you are being dominated. And I think that's the worst type of victim, is when they don't even recognize they're being dominated. They think they're just living a life and the life is okay. But the minute when you're able to point out to them the way that they are being mistreated, are being to become a victim, then they can better understand, oh, okay, maybe now I can understand how I am a victim. Because before then, they don't get it. I think they're only going to look at the fact of what most people see as a victim as being a part of a weakened person that's not able to protect themselves. So I found the both definitions in the word guide to be very helpful. So if I had to explain to someone about that, I would probably most likely use that as a guide to go by, because people they understand words, and words have meanings, and until you put a meaning to the word, they can still be lost in translation. So I think that that's a good way of helping them to understand that they are being victimized. And then maybe they can see clearly, oh, okay, I never thought about I'm being victimized this way, and that's what makes me a victim. Just my point of view. Thank you.
Agreed. If one can successfully communicate the victimhood that all non-white people carry, that could be diminish a lot of the barriers that it takes for a victim to understand what is taking place on this planet and their role in putting an end to it. On page 362, I thought this was a really interesting piece of the code, and of course very necessary, because victims like myself have been trained to be utterly insane. And so for 362, the code says, explanation: rioting results in harm being done to people who should not be harmed. No person should ever participate in them. They are unnecessary, incorrect, and produce little constructive effect for the misery suffered by the people who need help the most. I remember growing up and hearing about like the Watts riot that took place, and on the South Central riot that some of my victim unit participated in, and I would just think that, dang, I wish I could have went there too and got some TVs and got some free stuff. Totally unaware of how incorrect that thinking is, and I would see news of like so-called protests, and the so-called rioting taking place, and I would be like, dang, it must be nice to be there and be able to get some free trinkets and some free material items. But as I become more correct thinking, I understand how incorrect it is to want to participate in a riot and to contribute to any sort of rioting. Very, very important that that piece of the code is in here. Are there others who would like to share any notes, insight from the sections covered?
I got one. This is from page 363. It's like the third paragraph down. It's like all in bold. It says, whenever the white supremacists directly or indirectly offer to provide food, water, or medicine to non-white people, always expect the air, food, water, medicine, chemicals, etc., to have the direct or indirect effect of poisoning the minds and or bodies of the non-white people who receive them. Explanation: during the existence of white supremacy, racist man and racist woman have been known to use disease, germs, and drugs, chemicals, to do great harm to the minds and or bodies of the non-white people of the known universe. As long as white supremacy exists, this should be expected. So I really like this point, because if the usual suspects are going to be giving you anything for free, there might be something wrong with it. Or even when they're giving you information, they might be giving you information that was valid at one time and useful at one time, but by the time they give it to you, a victim, that information is invalid. But yeah, I definitely really like this point. Another thing that this point reminded me of, sometimes they like to put, some sort of a expensive trinket out in the middle of, out in the open with nothing guarding it, and just seeing a victim, take the bait. I remember seeing a YouTube video where they had put a bike out. It was a pretty expensive bike, and they had put a camera in the bike. And a black person, of course, they took the bike. They let them ride for like 5 miles. Then they got in the car and then tracked them down. And then they had the reporter and the cameraman ran like, you stole our bike and everything like that. So yeah, they like to tamper with the things that they give us.
I also had that part highlighted, and I also remember watching Cops some point in time where they would do that often, have bait bikes, bait cars, and they would have undercover race soldiers, women pretending to be prostitutes, and they would just use that to trick the victims into like, as you said, taking the bait. And also white supremacists have done like a really, really amazing job at making poison taste really delicious, and sometimes even filling sometimes. I know whenever I've been any of my institution like events and so-called just anything that they are doing to like commemorate something or celebrate something or doing something for the students, there will always be like just pastries there, like unlimited access to soda, unlimited access to all the things that you could possibly want to eat, if you're unaware that many of the foods that we consume are like really are like just poison, to say the least. A lot of meats and processed foods that we have been trained to eat is poison. And I really appreciate the aspect that says effect of poisoning the minds, because you can receive food from a suspected racist, and then you may begin to think that this suspected racist is someone that you can trust. You may begin to think that white people are good. White people are well-meaning because they are providing you with food or medicine. Remember, they were having victims of racism get the vaccine and giving them joints afterwards. So really, really interesting how this one plays out. We could have Miss Williams and Kwaku. Go ahead, Mr. Kwaku. I don't think Miss Williams has.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that was an accident in hand. I took it down.
No problem. I wanted to comment on what Dan had just read. I had that highlighted too. So this instantly made me think about places in which you find non-white people in the greatest amount. Places such as Africa, Southeast Asia, etc. And I believe that the white supremacists oftentimes will kind of do these things in those areas, because if you do it in a place like America where white people are kind of mixed out, you'll have those unfortunate losses, or it'll bring greater harm to the white people within the population. So I mean, a lot of this has been seen throughout the years, especially with like oftentimes when they are bringing things like vaccinations to places like Africa, for instance, for the AIDS epidemic, other epidemics, oftentimes those things sterilize people, create more harm than good. And kind of going off of what you guys have been talking about too, is like, when they bring certain things to the non-white neighborhoods, like the trucks and whatnot, a lot of times it is filled with poison, and it's just like why this kind of, it reiterates why you have to be always suspect of white people, because you never know what they're doing if you're not paying attention to them. Oftentimes people kind of see those things and think, oh, what a great thing that's being done there, or they'll say things like, oh, I'm just trying to give these kids a good time, or give them things that they didn't have. But in reality, they're just poisoning the population, the non-white people there. Yeah, so that's just kind of what I wanted to add to that.
Very well said, Mr. Quaku. Ms. Williams, would you like to chime in?
Wow, just hearing that, it took me back to thinking about growing up, and they used to have, I think it was called Department of Human, no, it's the Food and Drug Administration or something. But anyway, they used to give processed cheese, meat in the can, various things, right? And I remember people lining up and being so happy about that. And it just dawned on me that they could have been doing things to us even back then through the things that they were giving in the community. And people just never really thought about it. But it crossed my mind. And I was thinking every time that they would do that, people would gather and they would just go and be so happy when they come back and sharing with other people. But, ooh, damn, this is too much. But I just wanted to say that.
Yikes. I remember when I was in a very tragic arrangement in high school. The majority of foods that that the suspected racist family would make was extremely processed. I remember my first time eating this thing called Spam was with white people, and it just seemed very odd that this is what they were consuming on a regular basis. But as I understand the system a lot better now, I'm able to understand, oh wow, like this, many of their poisons harm Black people more than it harms them, and even if it does harm them, they have access to a non-racist healthcare. Well, they have access to a racist healthcare system that is designed to treat them correctly and to treat me incorrectly if I were to seek aid from them due to becoming sick from all the poison I have been consuming. So very interesting. And I really liked this part from the code, which states on 362, do not use a person as a hostage. Do not force any person to serve as collateral or act as an insurance object in any dispute between yourself and another person. Reason, a hostage is a person who was deliberately forced by another person to function as an object and or as a commodity for trade, barter, or sell to one or more other people. A hostage is also a person who is forced to do harm to others because of fear of another who has power over him or her. All of the non-white people in the known universe are functioning as hostage to those white people who practice white supremacist racism. Hostages are also slaves. No person should act in support of slavery. I remember watching various documentaries on like there's one really significant one involving I believe it was a suspected racist had been taken hostage by other suspected racists, and they placed a bomb collar around him, and they made him go and rob various banks until he was caught, and the bomb eventually went off and killed him. But I remember thinking that, wow, like a hostage situation, that seems to be so rare. We don't really have hostage situations anymore. And then you become less confused and you realize that you are the hostage. You know, you are being held against your will under the system of white supremacy. So that's really telling of our position on planet Earth. And maybe this part can be something that can be shared with victims to get their brain computer kind of guided towards doing what they should be doing while being dominated by the system. I thought this was also pretty constructive advice, despite me thinking that it would be quite difficult to get help from anyone in a system of white supremacy, but it stresses the importance of bare minimally, like at least attempt to get help, because the way I was conditioned was to not ask for help and not expect help, and I believe that to be a lot of the same conditioning given to victims of racism, that they shouldn't expect help or ask for help. So this also on 362, the code states, question, according to compensatory counter-racist logic, what is the correct thing for you to do if you are being greatly, seriously, unjustly, and unbearably harmed and you are unable to protect yourself? Answer, during the existence of white supremacy, do the following. Do all that you can to get away from the people, white or non-white people, who are greatly, seriously, unjustly, and unbearably doing harm to you. If you cannot get away from those people, go to or send a message to those white people who are best able to protect you and ask them to protect you. When you are desperately in need of constructive help and or in need of protection from being harmed, ask white people to give you that help. If those white people refuse to give you that constructive help, regard them as racist white supremacists. If you cannot help yourself and you cannot get help elsewhere, continue to seek help from those white people who refuse to help you. Continue to ask them for help until you are forced to take ultimate and final action against them because of their refusal. Regardless of what happens, make sure you do all that you can to avoid taking action against any non-white person, victim of white supremacy. Do not take any action against any person who you believe is not a racist white supremacist. During the existence of white supremacy racism, and according to compensatory counter-racist logic, it is the white supremacist, racist men and racist women collectively who are to blame for anything that happens to non-white people that should not happen. Therefore, during the existence of white supremacy, and according to compensatory counter-racist logic, the refusal of an able white person to help a non-white person who is desperately in need of constructive help is not the act of a person who intends to produce justice, balance between people, but the act of a racist white supremacist. So I really appreciate that. I think this is some great word ammunition. You know, if I ask a white person for constructive help and I know that they can provide that constructive help, but they refuse to do so, my next question will be, are you a racist white supremacist? Is that why you are refusing to help me in this moment? So maybe something we can all use. Hopefully we will not need to anytime soon. And hopefully we can produce justice before things get that dire for us. And then there's also a bit from 363 where the code mentions giving, like, do not give arms to white people suspected racist white supremacists, and also do not do or say anything that will help them to that helps to support white supremacy racism. And even that can go a long way into retarding the system, because we have been trained to just say and do thousands of things that support white supremacy, and whether it's blasting rap, so-called rap music through your car stereo, letting everyone know that you're listening to noise, right? People are saying nigga this, bitch that, bitch that. Stopping that could retard the system. No longer going to the beauty supplies where most likely you're going to be treated incorrectly by a fellow victim classified as Asian, while you're attempting to get the weaves, the extensions, the product we think we need to look pleasant. Stopping that could also retard the system. Also, when victims attempt to discuss racism and white supremacy, just let them speak. Just let them, talk about racism and white supremacy without getting upset without feeling like someone is attacking you, because a person speaking out against racism, white supremacy is directly or indirectly also trying to help you, because if they're doing it the correct way, they should be attempting to produce justice if they're speaking of the system. So there's millions of things we could do to stop giving support to racist men and racist women right now. We need to stop this right now. Even cursing, I have definitely diminished the amount of curse words I use, and yeah, I'm sure white people don't like that. Go ahead, Miss B.
Also, something that we can stop doing, stop, um, stop, okay, so we know something and we're like, ooh, well, I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna teach you, you don't know. Stop doing that. Stop volunteering information. I think that's something that we could do.
Agreed. Yeah, I definitely have stopped trying to teach victims who seem to be unwilling to learn about the system. I definitely have ended that, because that caused more headaches than constructive results, to say the least. Just
I was talking about white people.
Say again?
I was talking about white people.
Oh, you said to
stop volunteering. Yeah, stop volunteering information to white people.
Oh, yeah, I misheard you. Yeah, that's also something we need to do immediately. I'm just really reminded of I was sitting at my desk one time, and I just heard this black female, sorry, just talking on and on and on and on to this white lady outside, and the white lady, she didn't say much. She just listened to this black female just talk about her problems and talk about what she had going on. And I'm like, wow, she does not know how she's helping to support the system by trusting this white woman and giving her all of this information about her victim unit. Really incorrect. And perhaps another one is to just stop talking to white people in general. If you have nothing, if we're not going to talk about racism and white supremacy, I'm not going to talk about the production of justice, I have absolutely no reason to talk to a white person unless it's involving labor, some sort of job or something. Because I couldn't believe it when I asked my once I thought was an associate of mine to participate in the discussion, and she literally said, "I'm not willing to talk about that, but we could talk about other stuff." And I didn't even respond. I just left it at that. But I was just so, it was just so interesting that she thought it was correct to tell me that she won't talk about racism and white supremacy, but she will talk about other stuff with me. I think they are masters of disassociating and also because they're white and everything kind of just works for them without any effort at all from them. They don't even have to think about being white, what it means to be white, until a victim asks them that. That's when they may start thinking about, oh, what? I'm white? I don't think about it often. That's something I learned from that documentary that Miss Williams put, is that apparently white people rarely think about being that they're white until they see someone not white. It's really interesting. Go ahead, Kweku.
Yeah, I wanted to make a quick comment on the little story you gave. That's something that I see happen a lot, and not only are just Black women doing it, but I feel that non-white people have a real issue, withholding information from white people. I don't know what it is, but sometimes you get around white people and you just kind of feel like venting to them. I don't know why you would vent to a white person. I don't think they could ever understand what you're going through. but you know, venting to white people, and then in the same instance, you end up snitching almost about somebody. So I would agree, definitely, you know, get in the habit of withholding information from white people, at least personal information. I wouldn't say constructive information, but you know, stop sharing so much to white people. Mm. That's all I wanted to add for that. I did have a little section out of the book that I wanted to share. 363 says, avoid giving armed assistance to any racist, white supremacists, or to any armed or violent forces that are dominated and or controlled by the racist or suspected racist. Reason, it is unjust and incorrect to say or do anything that helps the racist or suspected racist to say or do anything that helps to support racism. Oh, okay, so yeah. I had that part highlighted. This made me think about the Army, definitely, because that is where a number of white people go, of non-white people go to, I think, directly assist racism. I've never been one for, you know, the Army, or ever believed that was something that was good, or something good could ever come out of that. I think the white supremacists have done an awesome job of tricking people or confusing, deceiving people into thinking that, you know, they're actually there to protect their loved ones or their nation. I've always felt like that the Army is nothing but a white supremacist tool to spread confusion and mistreatment. And, you know, thinking about the concept of freedom, because those are some of the things that non-white people specifically will tell you about the Army. Is, you know, I'm here to protect freedom, or here to make sure that people are free, stuff like that. Which, you know, just goes to show you that they don't even realize exactly what they are doing. And you know, I blame racism for that. Blame the white supremacists for that. So yeah, that I wanted to mention that. I think that the Army is definitely just armed assistance in general to any racist, any of these superpower, these white powers. It's definitely a big negative for the producing a system of justice. That's all.
Yeah, I agree. I also had that thought when I was reading. I wanted to bring it up. Thanks for mentioning it. Yeah, it would do so much to retard the system of white supremacy if all non-white people said, okay, we're trying to produce justice. So going into any military forces is totally against the production of justice, because all military branches specialize in direct or indirect violence, killing, maiming, and the destruction of non-white people in the areas that they reside. So that is one huge way that we definitely give assistance to the system, by joining their various military branches and thinking we're fighting for so-called freedom, our so-called country, when it's couldn't be farther from the truth. We are sent there to kill non-white people for various resources. There's a really sick, twisted joke. You know, it's like you join the Army. If you're a non-white person, you join the Army, the military, and then come back and buy a Camaro. You know, go out, kill some people in the desert, come back and buy a Camaro, live a good life, which is insanity, to say the least. Go ahead, Kwaku.
Yeah, I wanted to add, you know, going back, putting the focus back on where it belongs. You know, the white supremacists create the situations in which we have non-white people, you know, thinking that they can't do anything with their lives because of racism. They think I'm not good enough for school. I'm not good enough to learn, or I hate school. So, and you know, I want to get out of the ghetto. or for lack of a better word. I want to leave this place. So the only way I can do it is by joining the army. So they go, they join, and then they end up greatly aiding racism and the system of mistreatment that is currently in place through no fault of their own. So I think that the racist white supremacists have definitely set it up perfectly to where they expect to get a large number of non-white people to volunteer to join the military and aid them in their quest for spreading racism and for maintaining racism, white supremacy.
Yep, the white supremacists are geniuses and getting non-white people to join the army. They say we'll pay for your college tuition. They say we'll hire you first on the job. They make a lot of promises, and they also create the situation for the victim to be living in a very, very just in a concentration camp. A victim is living in a concentration camp known as the hood or whatever we want to call it. And then of course they don't want to live in that environment. And they see one avenue being, hey, I've joined a military branch and I'll be able to get all these benefits presented to me by racist men and racist women. But we must stop falling for the okie doke. We must understand that this is a huge way white supremacy is maintained and refined and expanded, because they don't want large numbers of white men dying in their conflicts and dying for resources. They want victims of racism being the main people who are dying in these conflicts, so-called wars. But yeah, so let them send their own people to go fight and die for oil, for minerals, for access to water, for access to land. Let the white people go fight and die for that. Stop allowing and volunteering ourselves to be their weapons of destruction, to be their tools of destruction, their slaves of destruction. Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
While you were saying that, the thought crossed my mind that just like we have the military people, right? We have in the prison system, they have what they call trustees, right? So these trustees are people similar to the ones in the military because they're put up or allow the people to be put up to allow them to continue to mistreat other non-white people as well, so they can get other extra benefits while they're in the prison system. You know what I'm saying? They still may be in the jail cell, but their jail cell might be a little bit different with a little bit more trinkets or whatever, because they are a trustee. But that thought crossed my mind that how that intertwines each other, even from the prison system itself, as well as the military. So we need to consider that too, that as victims, we need to pay attention that even if we're not going to the military, what are we doing here in the prison system that we are helping to promote the warden's agenda when we don't have to? We don't have to volunteer to be a trustee. You know what I'm saying? We could just let him choose someone else, so we don't have to help him to mistreat others. I'm mute.
Very, very well said. And to decode that word trustee, I trust this victim to do exactly what I need them to do, to keep me out of danger and to keep the mistreatment and subjugation happening. So very, very correct point. 364. This whole page just reminded me of just hearing, I don't, like Black people, yeah, I don't mind if they protest. They just have to be non-violent, or meeting so-called activists who have to constantly remind me and others that they are non-violent. And I suspect it's because their brain computer has picked up that if they are any threat to the system of white supremacy, they will get obliterated, to say the least. So 364, really interesting points. Code says, question, what is the difference between violence, counter violence, and non-violence? Answer, violence is any willful and deliberate act that is designed and intended to do unjust harm. Counter violence is any act that is intended to stop or counteract those who willfully and deliberately do unjust harm. Non-violence is the complete absence of violence and the complete absence of counter violence. So currently 2021, it is impossible for anyone to be so-called non-violence, because as long as violence of any kind is taking place, it's impossible for a person to be non-violent. So we need to stop using that verbiage, that terminology, because it doesn't make any sense in the context of white supremacy. Ms. Williams, is that a new hand?
No, sorry, I just had to take it down. Take it down.
No worries. And another really important piece of code and logic is when there is debate or confusion about war and or counter war involving the words America, Africa, or Asia, say the following. It is never correct for any person to seek to do harm to the production of America, Africa, or Asia. It is always correct for all people to do all they can to replace the system of white supremacy racism with the system of justice balance between people. Explanation. During the existence of white supremacy, and according to compensatory counter-racist logic, America, Africa, and Asia all have the same definition as the word justice. The word justice is correctly defined as balance between people and guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person who needs help the most gets the most constructive help. White supremacy, racism, and justice, balance between people, does not and cannot exist in the same universe at the same time. Neither can America, Africa, or Asia. America, Africa, and Asia are not places, they are concepts. They are the concept of justice that now exists only in the imagination, minds of people. White supremacy, which is the greatest and most powerful form of non-justice, is not only a concept, it is real. It is the dominant government of all of the non-white people in the known universe. It is the strongest religion against the non-white people of the known universe. So I think this makes a lot of sense. Like California, America, Africa, Asia, Taipei, all these places, they're not real. They don't exist. And perhaps this is why when I was growing up, I didn't care to learn the geography of the world. You know, I just didn't care. I didn't care to know the 50 states. I didn't care to know about anything, about any so-called places on planet Earth, because it just didn't seem like something that I should be concerned with. And then many years later, I'm introduced to the code, which states that these places are only concepts. So it makes a lot of sense. It's not real. Many of the things that were told to us are simply not real. Fiction, falsehoods, which is what we need to begin to understand and begin to use this information to counter racism and white supremacy. And I think that's also a good opportunity to talk about racism and white supremacy when a person says that this concept is at war with this concept, or this concept, like Iraq has a bunch of so-called terrorists. Well, actually, Iraq is not real, just a concept. And that's a great opportunity to introduce or speak some code, some counter-racist code, to be precise. Ms. B?
Okay, going back just a little bit to 364. When it comes to counter violence, something that I like to do for fun when talking to non-white people, I would like to say I say stuff like, okay, let's say they exercise or they 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 were eating healthy. They were telling me about food that they were eating, and it was healthy. I would say, oh, that's an excellent counter racism, counter violent move. I mean, counter racism move, and that kind of like gets them like, what does that mean? So sometimes saying certain things like in an encouraging manner, it helps the conversation um flow where we don't have conflict when talking about racism. And something else I like to do when I see the terms America, Africa, Asia, and other places named, when you notice that in the news, right? Sometimes they'll say America and they really mean white people. They won't say white people, they'll use the term America. And what I like to do is I like to put it out there that, look, America is a place. Africa is a place, is a piece of land. A piece of land can't hurt you, can't, it's people, it's white people that are doing these things. Because sometimes they'll put the place, the name of a place like America, they'll say, America did X, Y, and Z. No, America can't do that. That's a place. So that's something that I like to do. I like to point that out. And I just say that and just leave it at that. I don't like go any further. Now, if you ask me questions, then we could talk. But if you don't ask me questions, then that's fine. But I get yeah, people get curious when you say certain things.
Excellent, black-excellent counter-racist strategy. Introducing code through compliments, definitely a good way to reach non-white people. Something I will attempt to do, and that's something I have been doing because I recently convinced a associate of mine to purchase the code book, and throughout our conversation, she just kept speaking really logically, and I would say, "Oh, wow, it's really interesting," and I'm really like proud that you are already practicing code. Like what you just said is like counter risk logic, and that does a lot to boost one's a victim's self-esteem because yeah, the compliments that victims do receive are often vain. Like, yeah, you got, I like your hair, I like your shoes. There's nothing to that does very little to produce correct thinking and expanded thinking in the victim. But if you compliment the way a person like thinks, then they may be more open to learning more about counter racism. And go ahead quickly.
I just wanted to talk very briefly about the differences between violence, counter-violence, and non-violence. So this was the first time that I've been introduced to that, specifically counter-violence and non-violence. So I understand it says on top of 364. Question, what's the difference between violence, counter-violence, and non-violence? Answer. Violence is any willful and deliberate act that is designed and intended to do unjust harm. Counter-violence is any act that is intended to stop or counteract those who willfully and deliberately do unjust harm. Non-violence is the complete absence of violence and the complete absence of counter-violence. Then at the bottom, because I had highlighted this, where it says questions. Is the threat of violence the same as violence? Is the threat of counter-violence the same as counter-violence? Answer. Threats of violence are forms of violence if the threats result in reactions that cause unjust harm. Threats of counter-violence are forms of counter-violence if the threats result in stopping the violence. So I understand counter-violence to basically be not limited to, but kind of an act of self-defense. Basically to do whatever it takes to stop the unjust harm from being done. And the non-violence is just the complete absence of violence and counter-violence. So do you think something like counter-violence is something that should be promoted? I think so. I don't know how people would react to violence, the word violence in it. I think people would, automatically think that that involves harming somebody, but I don't think at all that's what Neely Fuller is saying counterviolence should be. And then the last part that I read, the threat regarding the threats of violence. At first I read that was kind of confusing, but I think I understand it better. So, but the last part, threats of counterviolence are forms of counterviolence if the threats result in stopping the violence. So would that be threatening violence in order to stop the violence which would be the unjust harm being done to you? I think so, maybe. So yeah, I think these are very important concepts and things to be utilized. I think it's important to seek first and foremost nonviolence whenever applicable, and then if that does not work, move to counter violence, and then violence always as kind of a last resort. Or honestly, violence should never occur, because as he says on the next page, it is something that can never be, that is never justified. And I agree with that. I agree with that. I don't think you can ever justify violence, at least this definition of it being, an act to do unjust harm. That means unjustifiable harm. You can't justify doing something like that to a being. So violence should never occur. That's all.
Yeah, violence is never justified. Counter violence is always justified, because every creature, no matter how small or big, has a universal creator given right to defend themselves from unjust violence, unjust harm. We just have been just really bamboozled and really confused to the point where we have been trained to just take violence, just receive violence, and maybe call it non-violence. I'm reminded of the civil rights era where Martin Luther King and them folks, they were calling themselves non-violent while experiencing tremendous amounts of violence from race soldiers and white supremacists. So they weren't non-violent. I believe they were just very confused as to how to go about what was happening in that moment of time. I really like this part from the code, 366. Extremely important. I would say. It says, killing, never bribe, demand, or force any person to kill or in any way do bodily harm to any person. If it is your will to have bodily harm done to a person, it is correct to do it yourself. If you intend to kill people for fun, for glory, or for material gain, the person who should be dead is you. Reason, it is unjust and incorrect for any person to bribe, demand, or force a person or animal to kill or in any way do bodily harm to any person. And I'm just reminded of this is very accurate. If every single white supremacist who has had the thought to kill a person has had who have just had incorrect thoughts to harm, if they have just turned that violence and intent on themselves and killed themselves, we might even not even have a system of white supremacy. But instead they took all that animosity, that hostility, they instead of it being used inward as it should have been against themselves, they have created a system where all that destructive energy is definitely pointed at us. But yeah, if you're thinking about killing for fun or material gain or glory, then the person who should be dead is most certainly you. I definitely second that a billion times. Yeah, it has helped me to correct my thinking, correct my thoughts of like, I know the system of white supremacy is really diabolical and makes me feel very incorrect most days, but it's not it's not a reason for me to go around killing people. Miss B?
It was brought up earlier about movies and the violence and how much, you know, killing is glorified. And yeah, I think that has washed over. No, what's a better term I could use? But that has definitely influenced a lot of non-white people and white people when it comes to killing, movies, and music, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I'm reminded of a scene. I forget the movie, but it involves Denzel Washington's character. He's a drug lord. I think he's playing one of the real life drug lords who was funded by the CIA, Nicky Barnes, I believe. But he's playing that character, and then he is so called disrespected by a black male, or the black male owes him money or something like that, and he just goes outside and casually shoots the black male in the head in the street. And images like that is how we have been trained to think nothing much of killing. Just pop someone in the head and go on about your day. Go have a snack afterwards, as what was done in that movie. So they have done an excellent job. I don't know how much times I've said this, but I used to spend a lot of time and energy watching Natural Born Killers. I've seen that movie way too many times. Any victim should ever watch something like that, but it definitely made killing look insanely fun. And there's black people getting put in ovens in that film, and I didn't think anything of it. I thought, hey, just a black person getting put in an oven. That's not racist. It's just, but little did I know how disgustingly racist and vile that film is, and most films that are produced under the system of white supremacy. And for folks who want to kill, who think that is something that they must do, this is also a very important thing to remember and have in your brain computer, your mind. From 367, it states, never under any circumstance kill a person and conceal or attempt to conceal the fact and the truth that you killed that person. In other words, stand by your work. Explanation: to kill a person and not be willing to say to all others that you killed that person is one of the greatest acts of self-contempt that a person can commit, and one of the greatest acts of contempt for the all power, the creator, the great spirit, Allah, etc. No, the white supremacists are not only the most powerful and the most influential people in the known universe, but they are also the masters of glorifying and making sport of killing people and hiding or making a mystery or a guessing game of the identity of those who kill. They particularly enjoy this when they are the ones doing the killing. So stand by your work. Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
I'm sorry how my mind works, but anyway, when I got to that point where it says stand by your work, what came to mind was me is a saying that I think they still use it occasionally. It's called man up. And normally that's, to me, it reminded me about stand by your work, right? But we can't really say man up. We have to say boy up, because we're not considered men or women in the system of racism, white supremacy. So if you do it, stand by your work and just boy it up. I mean,
wow. Well said. Very yeah, but we should just use our time and energy to not kill anyone unless it is going to be a racist white supremacist. 367, the code states, question: if enough non-white people speak and act according to the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept, what should be the expected logical result? Answer: the white supremacists of known universe will be forced to decide whether to kill all of the non-white people, or they will be forced to decide to end the system of white supremacy and replace it with the system of justice. And that's the goal. Yeah, we want them to have to make this decision sooner than later. We don't need another 100 more years of white supremacy. We don't need another 10 years of white supremacy. We don't even need another second of this diabolical, wretched system on planet Earth. So I really like that this aspect is mentioned over and over in the code, that we want white people, white supremacist racists, to either kill all of us or produce a system of justice. Nothing in between. Nothing in between. Oh, and back to the 366. I'm just gonna remind folks of this part. 366. Reason: it is unjust and incorrect for any person to bribe, demand, or force a person or animal to kill and or in any way do bodily harm to any person. I'm just reminded of how white people, suspected racists, seem to be the only group of people that I have knowledge of that have went out and got these things that were once called wolves and somehow created a thing called a dog from these wolves, and then they use these animals called dogs to maim, brutalize, terrorize, and kill Black people to such a degree that at one point in time it was illegal for a victim of racism to even own a dog, because white people saw dogs as weapons, because for centuries they used dogs as weapons. So white supremacy is so diabolical that even pets were used and are still used to harm and kill Black people. Really incorrect. 369, really important piece of code as well. It states, do not assume that those white people who fight and or kill one another are not racist white supremacists. Explanation: some white people who practice white supremacy sometimes have great disagreements about how white supremacy should or should not be practiced. When white people who practice white supremacy have great disagreements among themselves about how white supremacy should or should not be practiced, they sometimes fight and or kill each other on a massive scale. It is, however, incorrect to think that these fights are major wars. They are in truth small and large battles. Battles are small wars that are part of a major war. In the known universe, there's only one major war, and that war is called the race war. The war to maintain, expand, and refine the system of white supremacy racism. Those white people who practice racism and white supremacy sometimes fight major battles among themselves at the same time that they are conducting the race war against non-white people. The reason for this is to maintain supremacy over non-white people. While some white supremacists seek to gain more benefits from the practice of white supremacy than other white supremacists, any battles that take place between the white supremacists during the race war to maintain white supremacy are always conducted in such a manner as to ensure that non-white people remain subject to white supremacy before, during, and after the battles. So World War I, World War II, and the future World War III that they're probably preparing won't be about anything other than population tailoring or refining the system of white supremacy, I suspect. Communism versus capitalism is one big lie. That conflict does not exist. It is simply white people deciding to practice racism this way and white people deciding to practice racism that way, and they have a disagreement and bloodshed occurs. Doesn't mean that they care about Black people. Doesn't mean that they're trying to help Black people at all. So really important to understand, just because white people get themselves involved in these so-called wars with each other doesn't mean anything of constructive value will happen amongst victims of racism. we need to totally understand this, because I remember being very confused about, why is all these wars taking place? I don't get it. But now I most certainly do. Miss Wills, is that a new hand?
No, sorry.
It's all right. And the final thing I'm going to comment on is from 370. Oh well, it's not. It is from 370, but it's just like the very beginning of it, and it says, and their desire to practice white supremacy in a better or different way, some white people are willing to kill other white people. Explanation: the white people who die as a result of conflicts among white people about the best ways to practice white supremacy are regarded by white supremacists as white sacrifices and or as necessary losses. So they're very serious about this business of white supremacy, have no problem sacrificing their own in order to maintain and refine the system. That indicates to me that we are dealing with a very powerful enemy that perhaps has no problem destroying the planet if it means that there won't be a system of justice. I really hope it's not that villain level mentality as I suspect it to be, but it could be. Could be. I'm possibly the only reason why people have to exist from their perspective is to practice white supremacy. Without white supremacy, they may imagine that they are like experiencing like a great loss to their lifestyle, to their existence. So they rather destroy it all than produce justice. As I began to understand suspected races and their behaviors more, these thoughts become more and more prevalent in my thinking. That's all I have to say. I'll leave space for others to comment, share notes if they have any.
Yeah, I have a note on page 367 where it talks about, you already read this part, but it says enough non-white people speak and act according to the United Independent Compensatory Code system concept, what should be expected logical result. Honestly, when I read that, and it gave the two options of the white supremacists basically killing all non-white people or forcing to end the system of white supremacy and replace it with a system of justice. My first thought was like, from the other books that we read, is like, well, killing's in their nature. And I got like, okay, no. But then I keep going into this one spot where I just think killing is in nature, like the nature of it. But then also the other thing that I come to mind is when the question says like enough, like, and it has the quotations, it almost makes me think like we just need enough people to speak and act accordingly, and then there will be some sort of change, some sort of like that of those two options I just mentioned, there will be something that would happen. And I think like that is the point where in my mind is to get to that point where the decision is either to kill all the non-white people or replace it with a system of justice. And then also it reminds me of the thought of like when you are basically wanting to produce justice, you have to want to produce it with like basically like every fiber in your body or every bone, or just like that idea of just like everything you got is like to give it to it. And then we also, when we had a conversation with some guests on our previous book club meetings, it was almost like, well, I don't want to produce justice because I don't want to hurt someone's feelings, right? I want to maintain these relationships. I want to do this, I want this, and I want this. So it's almost already like stating that person doesn't want to produce justice. But also thinking on my part is like the effort it's going to take to just get enough people. So maybe I won't get that person, but I can get someone else. Like just getting that word enough kind of just like made it more hopeful instead of like the entire universe, right? Getting everybody, all the non-white people to speak and act accordingly. Obviously that's the goal, but I think for some sort of change, we just need enough people to almost like corner them and say, hey, you have to choose. So I think that was very hopeful when I read that question, and then the answer was just like, well, I do care. I don't want to say I don't care what I don't want to say I don't care like what the choice is, but I do want to say that getting there would just be almost like I don't want to say the end result, because I don't want to say that the end result is to replace the system. But I think like for my personal like thinking, like logic thinking, is like just to get to a certain point would almost be, I don't want to say we made it, but kind of I don't know what kind of words to use. I'm trying to be codified, but also like just getting to a point of like to see a difference, you know, because we keep going through these one thing, and you probably heard this, some of you heard this before. It's like, oh, we're making a step in the right direction. That's always said. Like, soon as something happens where it's like pretend to be in favor, it's like, no, but that doesn't go to like the right direction, because the right direction is for everyone to get to a certain point, which is for this aspect, to speak and act accordingly to the code in order to, oh yes, and thank you, Helen, progress. We hear that too. We hear this word progress, but we're not getting anywhere because we're not getting to this point here. So just my thoughts on that, and kind of just gave me a little bit of hope, but also a lot of work to do, because I think of these words again. Thank you, Helen, for progress, and these step closer. We get someone in office in Democrat and everyone's thinking they're for us. And it's like, what are we talking about? That's not even a step close, you know, but it's confusion. So I think it's important to have these conversations and also share, like, if we just get to a certain point, another change will happen.
Thank you, Miss Nana, y'all. I think we may be able to get to closing remarks. Would anyone like to start?
I can start since I just ended here. Just to close off everything I said before into closing, but also this reminds me of the work that needs to be done. Not saying like the communication work that needs to be done, like especially with the conversations we had earlier in this discussion, is really learning how to communicate these things and really using the code to help, to assist us. And when we are communicating with someone else who may not understand, who's not on board, has something to say, but also be able to almost like ask questions. So continue, like one thing I've been learning throughout this book is be able to ask questions, like learn how to ask questions, and not just any questions, because you have a goal in mind, but also be able to just like ask questions to understand someone else instead of being defensive all the time, and also just saying, hey, you're wrong, but just being open. Thank you.
Well said, Ms. Naya. I totally agree. My closing comments is if you want to put an end to this race war, it will take a serious collective of non-white people, especially Black people, and it will take a serious amount of people in effective numbers. So continue to attempt to spread code, introduce code to people, so that we could get this effective number reached ASAP, so we could get the white supremacists to do what needs to be done, because yeah, whether I really don't know if they will decide to kill us or produce justice. I really don't know, because the white supremacist mind is such a just such something that I can hardly comprehend on most days. So we must end this race war. We cannot allow it to go on for another 500 years.
For my closing comment, Area 9 war / counter war. Unfortunately, in the system of racism, white supremacy, it becomes necessary to perform counter war in order to force the racist white supremacists to stop mistreating all non-white people on the planet. Some great tactics and concepts have been laid out in this book so far, or in this chapter in particular, and looking forward to reading the rest. Looking forward to the next discussion. Thank you for the conversation tonight.
For my closing comments, I'd like to read the one thing on page 363 again. Whenever the white supremacists directly or indirectly offer to provide food, water, or medicine to non-white people, always expect the air, food, water, medicine, chemicals, etc., to have the direct or indirect effect of poisoning the minds and or bodies of the non-white people who receive them. And then one other thing I would like to add is just like it says that you should be prepared at any time to fight. You should also be prepared at any time to like lose contact with the other victims, whether they be associates or attempted family members. So that's my closing comments in regards to Area 9.
Extremely constructive business meeting, and I will see you in the next one.
My closing, coming from page 368, it says, question: when there is confusion about what is snitching and what snitching is and what is not snitching, say the following. Answer: everyone who mistreats anyone should be known to everyone. It is impossible to snitch on a mistreater. So to me, the main mistreater of people worldwide is racist white supremacists, racist man and racist woman. So I gladly snitch to the mistreatment that they have done to us. I'm mute.
Well said, and I totally agree with that statement from the code. Appreciate everyone's very constructive insight and notes, and we'll see everyone next week.